Hey guys, what's up? American Pizza Books here. So I've got another book review for you guys today, and the book I'm going to be reviewing is Black Creek Crossing by John Saul. You can look at the cover there. I think it's a pretty cool looking cover, in my opinion. Um, but yeah, I actually read and finished this book a few months earlier, but it actually kind of stuck with me, so I decided to do a review of it and whatnot. Now, I had only read one book by John Saul previously. It was called The Presence, and I thought it was just okay, if not rather unspectacular. It was kind of a half-baked science fiction thriller story. Uh, Again, it was alright, but nothing special. This is more up his usual alley, which is just more like straight-up horror, thriller, whatnot. Kind of like Dean Koontz in a way. But I think John Saul is a little bit more horror-based. But yeah, I decided to read this after watching another video, and the person basically recommended this one, saying that Black Creek Crossing was one of the really good ones by John Saul, of his more recent books. This is one of his more recent novels. I believe this came out in 2003 or 2004. He hasn't released anything since 2009. I don't know if he's even writing anymore. He may be retired. Probably is at this point. It's been like 11 years since he's written and released anything. But yeah, Black Creek Crossing by John Saul. It is more of a horror thriller based story. Like I said, more up his usual alley. But basically, the premise of this book is we have our main character. We have two main characters in this story, but our, I guess you could say, main character, where it all starts, the character it all starts with is Angel Sullivan, and she's sort of your stereotypical kind of bullied girl. She's kind of an outcast in school. She gets picked on a lot by other girls and bullied a lot. She gets made fun of because her name is Angel, and so they make fun of her for that. You do get kind of a backstory as to why her name is Angel, and that was kind of interesting. And I'll just read the synopsis on the back to give you guys an idea. Alright, so 13-year-old Angel Sullivan is thrilled when her family moves into a cool old house in Roundtree, Massachusetts, until she is socially shunned at school and falls deep into despair. But then she meets Seth Baker, who is the other protagonist in this story, a fellow outcast, and a fateful kinship is forged. Seth tells Angel about the whispered rumors of something supernatural lurking in her family's house. Curious, Angel and Seth devote themselves to contacting whatever restless soul haunts the dark recesses of Black Creek Crossing, the titular title. With ghastly revelations, they unleash a vengeful spirit and a terrifying power, and there is no turning back. So yeah, we have our other protagonist, Seth Baker, and he comes from like an upper middle class family, and he's kind of the same way, pretty much an outcast. He doesn't really live up to his parents' expectations, particularly his father's expectations. His father is just a huge asshole, basically. I thought that he was... John Saul definitely did a good job writing Seth Baker's father. He's a very abusive, very physically abusive. There's a lot of scenes of graphic physical abuse in this book. So if that is particularly like triggering to some people or whatever, that I wouldn't recommend reading this book. And there's also other quite violent scenes in this book. If you're also sensitive to like animal violence, violence against like animals, animal abuse, whatnot, I also wouldn't recommend this book, because there is a scene of that in here too. There's quite a few gory scenes in this book, and very unsettling scenes. But there are several scenes with Seth and his father that are with abuse happening, and it's kind of disturbing. But I'll get more into that in a minute. But yeah, basically, just as it goes, Angel Sullivan and her family are kind of down their luck. Her father is an alcoholic who can't keep or maintain a job. He keeps getting fired, and her mother works for a missionary, and she doesn't make a whole lot. And they decide to move because Angel's her mother's sister, who is a real estate agent, finds this house in Black Creek Crossing, and it's for a really cheap, affordable price, and so they decide to get it. The house on Black Creek Crossing has a very brutal and violent past. There was a murder there, and pretty much everyone who has lived there either hasn't lived there for long, or other stuff has happened, and they're kind of hesitant to buy it, but they figure that they go ahead and buy it anyways because, it's what's affordable. So Angel and her family moves into this house, and she meets Seth. They kind of strike up a friendship, and that's kind of the story. And then later on in the story, they find this hut in the woods that's in the back of the house at Black Creek Crossing, and they find this book that's in Latin. I believe it's in Latin, and it's like witchcraft basically. So they start like practicing like witchcraft and whatnot. That's essentially the story of Black Creek Crossing. Now, the story of this book kind of gave me like Amityville Horror vibes a little bit, because you've got a family moving into a house that has a very violent history of, killing and abuse and whatnot. And so I thought that it was going to kind of go in that direction, and it kind of does a little bit, but it ends up taking a different turn towards the end. It also gave me Carrie vibes a little bit as well, like Amityville Horror vibes mixed with Carrie vibes because of what happens with the two protagonists later on in the story. But so that's essentially the story, and as they read from this book and like learn like witchcraft and whatnot, they start to get back at their bullies, the kids that are bullying them at school and whatnot. So I guess in a way that's kind of what gives me the Carrie vibes more than anything. As far as the characters go, these characters, like, they aren't incredibly deep. Like, they're not going to be characters that you're going to remember. It's not going to be, like any great characters of literature, like, Atticus Finch or any characters like that. But, I mean, like, I wouldn't say they're completely cardboard cutouts either. Angel's father is kind of a stereotypical alcoholic, abusive father figure. There's kind of a thing set up where, and this is where I mentioned the Amityville Horror vibes, it seems like the house is starting to possess the father, and is trying to encourage him to, like, take advantage of his daughter, of Angel, and it does continue towards the end of the story, so it is kind of like Amityville in that way, but yeah, the father to me, he showed like a sign at one point in this book towards the beginning that he may have not always been this way, that he may have like become this way through whatever he's been through. But more than anything, he kind of does feel like, the stereotypical, alcoholic, abusive, physically abusive father. So he didn't feel incredibly deep. Angel's mother is very religious. So maybe that's yet another thing that gives me like, kind of like a Carrie vibe. She sort of feels out of place because her sister, Angel's aunt, and uncle, and their son, who was actually one of the kids bullying Angel and Seth, they're a part of this country club, and they're also kind of upper middle class, and they're kind of, I will say this, John Saul does a good job of showing off, like, some of the more, just arrogant and snobby, characteristics of what some of these communities can be like, just very, very, well off, holier than thou, stuck up, communities, because that's very much what this community is like in, what was the town? Roundtree, Massachusetts. And Angel's mother kind of feels out of place because her sister tries to bring her into this, brings her to a few of the social gatherings at like the country club and whatnot. And I think Saul did a pretty good job of just like like looking at some of the less some of the less redeeming qualities of class, wealth, and whatnot. But yeah, so the mother, like I said, religious, very religious. She is not particularly likable either, because something happens in this book where Angel comes to her about something, and basically the mother doesn't believe her, and I believe the mother actually just slaps her. So, I mean, she's not a particularly likable character either. She's not abusive per se, but none of the parent figures really in this book are very likable. Like, and that brings me over to, like, Seth's parents. I felt like Seth's parents were a little bit more, Angel's parents felt like caricatures. Like, Seth's parents felt a little more real to me. Like I said, Seth's father, very abusive, very, not an alcoholic, but just very abusive. He wants his son to be one thing, but his son is the other. Seth is very into photography and kind of a loner. His father wants him to be, this, like, he wants him to be into sports. He wants him to get along with, get on with, like, the other boys in school and whatnot, and that's not Seth, and therefore Seth's father is very disappointed in him. And whenever Seth displeases him, that's usually what leads to the physical abuse. And then his mother very much turns a blind eye to the abuse and kind of just doesn't do anything about it and tries to shut it out. And that feels like it feels like a very real life scenario. Not that anything with Angel's parents wouldn't be a real life scenario, but just something in the way that Saul writes the parents of Seth just felt more real and fleshed out to me a little bit more. As far as the main characters go, Angel is not incredibly deep, but I feel like we do get, like I said, we get some backstory with her, and of her name and why she's called Angel. And that's kind of a nice, interesting layer to her character. You do feel bad for her, and she does, like, struggle with her weight, and I guess that is sort of a cliche. She thinks that she's fat, but Seth tells her that she's not, and whatnot, and she kind of comes into her own towards the end, and, I almost feel, it seems like towards the end when she decides to just start standing up to, her bullies and whatnot, and to just say screw it, and just it almost feels like it's part her, but it's also part her sort of getting possessed by the spirit that is a part of this book. The spirit of a 300-year-old, it's a woman who was hanged for being a witch 300 years ago, and she kind of is the one that haunts the house. And so I don't know if it was like her kind of semi-possessing Angel, and Angel also coming into her own, like, by herself. It was kind of hinted at that was the case, but I felt like it kind of just came out of nowhere. Like, one instance, Angel is this kind of very timid, very just timid, mousy, girl, whereas, like, all of a sudden she's like the complete opposite, and she's just like, she doesn't give a shit. She just has no problem being, standing up to her bullies and whatnot. So I don't know. Seth is pretty much the same way. I mean, you feel bad for him too because of the pressure that he has on him, and the way his father treats him, and the way just both of his parents treat him, and the way his mother kind of turns a blind eye to the abuse that's going on with his father. There was one trait that I thought that was very strongly hinted at, but was never delved into. And there was a point in this book where it almost seemed like Seth was, like, supposed to be, like, gay or something, because there's this one scene where, like, he's putting makeup on Angel, and he says that, oh, I was in like the drama class, drama club or something. Um, but it doesn't ring true in the context of it. And the bullies call him Beth. They nickname him Beth for some reason. I forget if it's actually like if the reason it's gone into or not. Um, but they call him Beth, and there's one scene where the bullies are like taunting him, and they kind of make like a an insinuation about him, and it causes him to blush and whatnot. So it's like, I mean, is that like the secret behind why he's called Beth and whatnot? Like, is there more? Is there? That was never really explored, though. I mean, it was kind of insinuated, sort of there. At least it was like kind of to me. I thought I saw that, but it was never like delved into whatnot. That would have been like interesting to see more of that maybe trait of Seth, but we don't really get to see much more of it. As far as the other characters go, like the bullies, there's not really much to them. They're pretty much your stereotypical bullies. It kind of reminded me of the bullies from Stephen King's It, where they're just very, very, very just sociopathic and psychotic, just like almost cartoonish. Like one of the bullies, there's 3 male bullies, and one of them sort of has a conscience a little bit. Like they do something with a cat that Angel takes up. She adopts, well, not adopts, but like a cat follows her around. She pretty much, just takes him under her wing. She calls the cat Houdini, and he kind of follows her around and whatnot. But there's like this scenario where this is the animal abuse I was talking about, but they're basically gonna like just to get back at Angel and Seth, they're gonna like take this cat and basically beat it to death, essentially. And Jared was the bully's name. Has second thoughts about it and doesn't really want to do it. And again, so you have one of the bullies that has somewhat of a conscience, and again, that would have been interesting to like get more into his character and into his mind and whatnot, and like but we don't really get that. It's just it's shown to us a few times, and then it's kind of like left alone after that. Same thing with there is a female bully in here too, and she has a best friend, and the best friend is the same way. Like we get into her head for like one short chapter, and she's looking at, I can't remember the main girl bully's name for the life of me, but the best friend is kind of like giving us her thoughts and talking about how she knows that her friend is a bully, but she just doesn't have the guts to like stand up to her and tell her what she really thinks. And again, that's something that could have been like explored more. That would have been interesting to see, but we don't get any more of that other than that one short chapter. So that's really the characters. The characters, again, I mean, not completely like just paper thin cardboard cutouts. I was certainly like invested in the main characters, I would say, but at the same time, I wouldn't say they're like very, very fleshed out like 3-dimensional characters or anything. I mean, they're kind of just your basic characters for this type of book and this type of genre. So, not bad. Not bad, not great, but not bad either. I spent a lot of time on characters. The pacing, as far as the pacing goes, and just how much I had fun with this book overall, the pacing was pretty good, actually. I never felt like there was a slow moment in this book. The story moved along. It didn't really get bogged down by anything or whatnot, and I appreciated that. Like, with Stephen King, for example, there can be, like, sagging middles in some of Stephen King's books. Now, I don't always mind, like, those sagging middles, or if a book gets, like, slowed down a little bit, as long as what's being talked about, or what's being, or if the characters are discussing something, or whatever's happening, as long as it's going, like, contributing to the actual story, and what's happening is still interesting, then I don't mind slower parts. But I didn't feel like there was really a slow part in this book. I felt like it had a pretty even pace and it moved right along. So the pacing was pretty good. And subsequently with the journey, just how much I had fun with it, I had a lot of fun with this book. I mean, it's not, it's certainly not going to be, the next, it's not like the next great American novel. It's not, great, superb literature or anything, or great work of literature, or, or whatever. It's just a book that you can just sit down, relax, and have fun reading, and that's what it was, and that's what it accomplished, and so I enjoyed it. I liked it. I mean, a lot of people read to get away, to get away and to go into another world or another situation with characters. And I mean, a lot of people read because they enjoy reading, because read for entertainment. And that's what this book did. It was entertaining. It entertained me. So it did its job. So no complaints in that regard. Let's see what else. Yeah, I mean, the journey was pretty good. The pacing was pretty good. The ending wasn't quite what I expected, but I felt like it matched the overall tone of the story. I won't say what it was, but it also gave me a bit of a Carrie vibe, so that might be kind of a spoiler a little bit, if you have an interest in reading this book, that is, but... Yeah, and then, like, at the end of the book, it ends with, I guess this will be kind of a spoiler, but it ends with Angel's aunt selling the house to someone else. So, spoiler, they don't end up staying there. And she's very reluctant to do so, but she ends up selling the person the house anyway, so it's like, oh, the curse of the house will continue, So, I mean, I liked the ending. It wasn't not a great ending, I would say, but it was a decent ending. It didn't leave me disappointed or anything, or left me thinking, oh, that was such a bullshit ending. Yeah, it was a decent ending. Let's see what else. I mean, overall, I would say, I don't know. Overall, I would probably give this like a 4 out of 5. It's not. I feel like certain characters that were briefly spent that briefly came in, again, like that one bully, I felt like there were certain things that could have been more fleshed out. I feel like certain characters could have been more fleshed out, and Saul could have spent more time on some of these characters, with Seth too, with some things with Seth. I guess that would be my major complaint. It's not really anything terribly original. But in my opinion, if it doesn't have to be completely original, as long as how you execute that idea that may not be that original, it just depends on the execution of it. And if the execution of it is good, then I'll enjoy it regardless. And I feel like the execution of the story was fairly decent. So, yeah. I mean, everything about this book was pretty decent overall. I mean, nothing like spectacular or anything, but it was just a decent, fun book that entertained me for the time that it took me to read. And that's what I was looking for, So I'd recommend it, if you're looking for a good, horror thriller book that's, fairly fast-paced and will keep you on the edge of your seat and whatnot. I'd certainly recommend Black Creek Crossing by John Saul. And yeah, let me know if you've read John Saul, what you think of his books, and any ideas of what you'd want me to read and review on this channel. So, yeah, pretty much it for this one, and I'll be back at you guys soon with more videos, hopefully soon. So, peace, have a good day, and keep on reading.